All right. So yeah, so last class we were seeing more from plugins. We saw some examples of plugins, and especially we were seeing the structure of plugins. So moving forward, there are a couple of other topics which we need to cover. So before going into it, there was one specific thing which I said I'll tell you later. So if you remember when we had, okay, so when we created, so I was telling something about snapshots here, right? So whenever we're giving a version ID, we used to give it as 1.0 snapshot. This was the default name which we always used. So if a question comes maybe from interview point of view or from understanding why do you need that, the question will ask in a different way. They'll ask you, so either it could be what is snapshot or what is the need of snapshot, or when you are working, if the question comes to you, why do we need a snapshot? So the very first thing what you need to understand is the version ID, whatever you create here, will be the version of the jar file which you're releasing to the customer, right? So if you remember, so where was I? Sorry. Okay. So here, so if you had seen, after compiling this, we used to get a, okay, quickly, let me try it. So you get a jar file with the same name version, right? So what will happen is, whenever you're releasing something to the customer, it will always be based on a version number. So a version number comes into the picture only when we are releasing something. So unless and until you're not releasing, you might be using it for testing purpose, right? Until then, you will be using some other name, or you don't even go with the concept of version string. I'll go inside the complete topics when we are seeing the release management. So, but you just remember this much. You might be releasing anything. That doesn't matter. You are into the build management or whatever it is. You will create a version number only when you're releasing it to a customer. So, what does it implies? It is says that whatever 3 digits number that you're using refers to a major, minor, and a patch number. So it is depending on what you're trying to give it to a customer to identify it, and to trace back any point of time, you use that version. So now what will happen if you are using a version number for every build? Then what will happen every time you do a build, you have to keep on changing the version number. That is logically not possible. And second thing, what will happen if you take as a whole product, say that you have a product 1 which is dependent on product 2. Now every time when you are doing a build, if you try to build a jar with some specific version number, what will happen? How will the project 2 get the project 1's jar file? Okay, my question is in the reverse way. If project 2 depends on project 1.jar, right? Now from where will it pick it up?
From project one.
Okay, typically from Maven's architecture, where will it pick it up?
From the local repository of
Exactly. So now, so what will be the file name that it is going to represent? It is going to check for project 1.jar with some version number, just like this, right? Now, every time if you keep changing the build, so if the file name also changes, now whatever the project 2.jar is taking will not be the latest, right? Because when you are putting a dependency, you have to say some specific name, which jar you have to pick up. So in that case, every time if you keep changing the release of project 1, so like you do project 1 build, you will create one name. you create project 2 second build, then sorry, the project once again, if you build, you will be giving one more jar name. So like this, every time you rebuild project 1, there will be new jar file names. So correspondingly, what you have to do, whoever is owning the project 2, they have to ensure that, okay, project 1, they have updated, and they have to see what is the name of the file they've updated, and then they have to come and do some modification in their pom.xml corresponding to that. So if they keep doing it, it'll not be feasible, because you might think just as one file, but think about bigger dependencies. So many projects uses the same thing. So for that logic, what we do is we go with the standard called snapshot. So as the name indicates, snapshot always represents a particular scenario. So whenever you have such a kind of dependencies, it is always better to use a common name, so that no matter how many times you rebuild project 1, project 2 will be referring to the same file. That is whatever the name -1.0 snapshot, and that is the standard we follow. And not only that, it also ensures that that file is a development copy. So only when in the final stage, when you're trying to do a release, you rerun the same thing by changing the version here. So you just simply go to the version, you change the number whatever you want, and then rerun. So what will that happen is, it will create a new file only when we are doing a release, but until then it will be recreating the same name. So for that standard, we follow a naming convention. That is what we call it as snapshot. Is it clear? So it indicates, in simple, snapshot indicates a development copy of your project and not the something which you can release. So if you see a jar file or a var file with a name that one.snapshot, then it means that it is under development and you're not going to release. Wherever you see a version number instead of snapshot, that means then that is the file which you have given to the customer or you are going to give to the customer. Getting it?
Yes.
Kumar, are you clear?
Yeah, so mean to say that I have too many jars. The final copy we are trying to send it to the which one is the valid one. We are that which one we are sending to the customer. That is the final snapshot, right?
Yeah, so you don't call it as final snapshot. You can change by
Okay,
giving it a actual version number.
okay, okay.
I mean, it's
But
a standard.
the
What?
the version which we compiled, right? That is the final version what we are talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, got it.
Okay. So why did I talk about all those dependencies? We'll see it now. So far, whatever we saw was still a little basic thing, or you could consider that, yeah, module was there, plugins was there, that and all is fine. Now, consider you're working on a real project. So there could be like hundreds of files, right? Okay. And then, do you think you will be putting all the 100 files in this one directory? Everything, all the 100 files will be here? Possibly it can be there. But what will happen is, it's always a good idea to segregate it based on the functionality. Now, when you want to segregate in the based of functionality, you cannot put one directory here, all the group of files, one more directory, because Maven doesn't understand anything further. It has to be present, all the files should be present in this directory. In case if it is not present, it doesn't follow, because it has to follow this directory structure. So in that case, what you'll do is, always whenever someone is writing a project, then they always make sure that the structure is in such a way that all the related files to a particular functionality will be in one bigger directory, which means you separate the folders with respect to the components, or simply we call it as modules. So for each module or each component based on its functionality, you will be putting one directory. Now, since we are using Maven and we have to follow a directory structure, right? Logically, what is the structure we need to follow? first thing we need to do is we need to, where was that? Okay, so first thing is we need to have a directory in which you should have a src, then following all the directory structure, then we should have a corresponding pom.xml which understands this. So in the same case, when we have multiple modules inside the same project, what we can simply do is, rather than putting everything into one folder, we can simply create multiple folders or multiple directories which represent a particular component. So what you can do is, instead of putting everything under here, you create one folder here, okay, and you call it as module 1. Okay, now inside module 1, what you should be having, you should be having the same directory structure. So we can put a files like this, so that now if you see, demo is a parent product, wherein inside that module 1 is a single component. So now you have the freedom in two ways. That is, if you want, you can directly come inside module 1 and you can work on that. If not, you can go back to the demo as a product, we can work on that also. I'll show you that how we can do it. So now assume that you have like this. Okay, so now if you see, we have two modules, both of them are present inside demo as a product, wherein individually mod 1 is a product by itself. So which means it is a mini project by itself. Why we call it as mini project, or why do I call it as a project by itself? Because it has its own directory structure which Maven understands, and it has a corresponding pom.xml. So now what we can do is, in order to do the build for this, we will put all the files related to this component inside this particular directory, and we will create one pom.xml related to that. Okay, now what is that we have to do? We have to simply do some modifications. And what modifications we have to do? If you see, I have created a new pom.xml. Logically, I've copy pasted, but it acts as a new file. So simply we have to do some modifications. Why? Because first of all, where it is now, it is in module 1, right? So we just go inside and do some small modifications. So now if you see, what is the artifact ID here? It is module 1. So the name of the project is also mod 1. Okay, that's it. I'm not doing anything else. Maybe if you want, we can keep the build, the same concept will hold good. To avoid confusion, I'm not going with any plugin. Okay, I'm just using the default profile, so that whatever I want to do, we can do. So similarly, if you have any plugins related to this particular component, you can put everything or define everything here. Okay, so now if you go to mod 1, and now if I say Maven package, what is it going to do? It is going to compile only the module 1 project. Why? Because module 1 is again a sub project of demo 1, and it has its own directory structure, and it also has its own pom.xml corresponding to it. So if you go now inside that, so you see it has created a mod 1 where -1.0 snapshot is the standard name that it is appending. Similarly, we will go inside mod 2 and we created the same structure, right? Copy pasting. We'll also modify here. So I'll say mod 2, and here also just for reference, I'll say mod 2. And if you want, we can keep it still here. It doesn't matter. Just to avoid confusion, I'll remove this. Okay, now I've done this much. So now what let's do is, now let's compile mod 2. Okay. Okay, so now what did we do? So now we created multiple modules. Okay, that means the parent demo product can have multiple modules wherein we are considering each of the module as a separate project. Why? Because internally it has its own pom.xml and it has src, so that all the source files related to this will be going inside. All the tests related for this component mod1 will be present here, so that whoever is the developer, when you're writing code, it will be easy for them to maintain separately. Okay, so now when whoever is the developer who wants to test his component, he'll be going here and he'll be testing only his component, so that it should be working fine. Okay, so this is how you can have multiple modules. It's very simple. Okay, so did you guys get that? It looks so simple, right?
Yes.
So
Okay.
to say, suppose I have another module,
Mm-hmm.
so which will have say 10 jars.
Mm-hmm.
So simply I can go and copy src folder over there, and uh, can I build like this?
Yeah, that is reproducibility. So all you have to do is like, see, copy, paste, rename the folder, go to the pom.xml, correspondingly you modify whatever you want to put inside it. Okay, I'm just not doing anything just for demo, but if you have any specific dependencies or if you have any specific plugins, you modify into it, and then you go to the src folder. Here you change all the source code related to only mod 3. That means you remove all the older ones and put only those files specific to mod 3. And once you're done, what you can do, I can, okay, I can do a clean. Then you can just simply run. I will clean and then I'll do package. So it will first delete all the older files and then it will run a compile, do the package once again. Okay, so like this you can create as much as possible. Now that is the advantage of Maven. So with just copy pasting and following the same structure, you can redo everything easily. You're getting it? Did you get that? Hello?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but again, so if you see, it's very simple. I mean, what did I do? Rather than having the pom.xml and the src directory here, I created couple of directories and we made it as individual components or individual projects. So it's just easy. But now the question comes, what if you have 15 modules like this? Okay, or say 10 modules like this, and if you want to compile as a product, because when you go as a build engineer, you will not be just building one component, but you will be building the entire product. So for my entire product, I need to build 10 jars like this. So first question, how will you do it? Will you be going inside one by one and executing the command maven package, maven package, maven package, or whatever you want to do? Is that one way that you can do? But will it be easy to do if you have more? And at the same time, what if you have some dependencies? Which means, say that, like I said, module 2 depends on module 3. So when you are compiling, you have to first compile module 3 and then compile module 2. Now in those cases, how will I remember? So is it that we have to remember everything and we have to give? Now that is one of the problem that will happen in Ant, wherein it doesn't know anything. So you have to instruct to it saying that what is the dependency order, all those things. Whereas if you see in Maven, it has the intelligence of taking care of the dependency management. So if you remember, I said that. So how it is going to do, let's see that, and you will see what is the advantage and how simply, I mean, or how simple is it to do it in Maven. It's all needed is that you have to understand the structure. Okay, so the first thing what we'll do is, before going into the dependency, let's see how we can build it as a project. So now our requirement is, rather than going inside one by one, I just need to invoke one command for the product, and it should build me all the jars which is required for this demo project. So in that case, now how will you act everything? How will you call Maven? And if you remember, if I say some command like this, how does Maven run all these things? It is with respect to a configuration file called pom.xml. Okay, so now in order to execute everything from here, you should have a corresponding pom.xml. Only then it was doing everything. Okay, so what we'll do now is let us create one pom.xml so that that will try to call all this pom.xmls internally and it will work. Okay, so now what I'll do is, if you remember, I had opened this in the long time, right? So I've still opened and I've kept it in the editor. So now what I'll do is I'll just share this. Sorry, I'll just save this. So now if you see, you have a pom.xml and it is present in the demo folder. And the next thing, so what happens if I execute Maven from this place? It will try to read a pom.xml and correspondingly to that, it will work based on a src folder which is present here. So now if you see, there is no src folder. Why? Because we are not doing any build directly, wherein the src folder is within this, but you have one pom.xml corresponding to this. Then what is the need of this? So the need of this pom.xml is to go inside each of these directories and call whatever command that you're invoking. So the important thing is this pom.xml is going to act as a parent, wherein the pom.xml what you have inside each one of them is going to act as a child pom.xml. So the need is, if you want to build, you can directly go inside and build. If not, using this pom.xml, I'm going to call each one of them. Okay, now, so if I do that, how it will react? So the first thing here, if you see, in the pom.xml, we have GAD, group ID, artifact ID, and version. GAV is present. Okay. Now, along with this, I have told you sometime back, I mean, basically in previous class about this packaging. So what does it mean by packaging here? And what do you mean by jar here?
It's a compiled packet.
Yeah. So what do you mean by jar here? It means, did we
It is
tell?
asking, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. I think I was wrong. Yeah.
No, no, go ahead, go ahead. What is that? Vinay, you're saying
I think
something.
it is the POM file is asking. Yeah, the POM file is asking Maven to make a jar file out of it.
Exactly. So we are not saying anything, right? When I say package, how does it know automatically to create the package? It is based on the reference what I've given here. So if it is a var, because if you remember the first day I said, when you are using the archetype, it will automatically know how to create. That is because in case if you are trying to create a var file, then you've just put it as var. Automatically it will try to create a var. The end result of your package will be a var file. So you should put what and all is required for the var file in the same structure, because right now we are not doing anything. If it is a var file, then you need to follow this structure here, because if it is a var, which is nothing but a web application, then you need to have certain configuration files, some web apps folder. So all those things you have to put. Right now it is very simple. Instead of that, you will find some folders here. You will find resources and whatever that you're trying to do, those kind of things will be there. So only then automatically it will try to take it up. Okay, I am trying to create a what? A var. So now here if you see, if it says packaging is jar, that means this pom.xml is used to create a jar. But if you see now, neither there is any source file nor you will be creating any jar, because there is no src folder which correspondingly has all the Java files. So that means it is not the right convention what we are using, right? Because if you have the jar here in the any one of the modules, then that means that this pom.xml is used to create a jar. But here we are not going to create a jar, but you are just trying to call all these modules. So the purpose of this is only to call all the internal pom.xml. So in that case, the first thing what you need to do is you need to change the string to pom. Okay, so if you put pom here, it means this pom.xml is a parent.xml and it will not do anything by itself, which is it will not do whatever the life cycle of the phase it is. It is used only to pass on the information to its child. Okay, so that is what it means. Okay, now the first thing what we have done is we have given the pom.xml and we have told it to be POM packaging, which means this is a parent and it has to handle all the modules. Okay, now how does it know what modules it has to handle? Okay, so for that, what structure we follow is, okay, and let me show you the structure first. So now, if you have a similar example, so we have to use a tag called modules, and inside that you will specify the all the modules or the components, whatever directories you have with respect to each modules directory. Okay, so now we'll do the same thing. So inside the parent, I will say this much mod1, mod2. Okay, and if you want, you can add mod3 also. So now I'll put it like this. So what is that we have done? What I have done is now I am saying that there is a parent POM, or we call it a super POM, and this parent POM is used to invoke the pom.xml of all the other modules here. Okay, so now see what happens. So where are we? We are in the parent project directory. Okay, so to have a better understanding, I will delete this. Okay, and now if I invoke Maven package, see what is it going to do. Okay, so what is that done? If you see, it is going inside module 1 and module 2, and one by one it is trying to compile, and finally it is saying that I am working on a product itself. So it goes from all the dependencies inside it. So for this module you have this project you have module 1 and module 2, or two components, and since you have specified it here as module 1 module 2, then automatically it goes inside and it will read the pom.xml corresponding to it, and it knows what and all you have to execute. Based on what you have given, it will execute. Suppose if you add one more module, it will still work in the same way. So if you say this, okay, and now if you say this, see what it does. So it just went fast, but it would have gone one by one. Now what is that you notice here? So
In which we give, it's following that same pattern.
exactly. So it is following the same order what we have given, and it is working fine. Okay. So is it clear until now?
Yes.
Okay. Before I make it complex, I wanted to show you something else, then I'll come to it. So at least are we fine now? How do you handle as a product? Here you write whatever you want in this pom.xml that will make sure how this particular component or module should work, wherein you come as a product when you want to invoke, this is how you'll be just invoking, and that will take care of everything. Okay, so if you have this understanding, before proceeding to the next one, Now what we'll do is we have to understand one more concept called as dependencies. Okay, just like plugins what we saw, we might be having a lot of dependencies, right? So let's first understand dependencies and then come back. So before that, any doubt in this? Any doubts? No?
Yeah, fine.
Okay. So now I said one more thing, and we know for now is that Maven does the dependency management, right? So now let's see as a whole project or as a whole product, how can we do a dependency management? Okay, so now we had module 1, module 2, module 3, correct? Now I'm saying your module 3 is dependent on module 2. So what does it mean? It means in order to compile module 3, I need to have module 1 -1.0 snapshot.jar available. Only then it will come and pick it up. Okay. Now, the first thing what we need to do is we need to specify the dependencies. So how will you specify the dependencies? So now going back to the question, how will you identify a jar in Maven? It is using the GAV, right? So no matter plugin, no matter any kind of jar that you use, you always refer to GAV. And that is why I was saying it is very important. So now, if you see, we need to know the GAV of your module 2 so that I can give it as a reference to module 3. Okay, so now what is the syntax is? It is again an attribute where you have an attribute called dependencies, and that will contain all the dependencies which you have. Okay, so now within that, each dependency or each jar which is dependent has to be given within the subtag called dependency. So for now, for module 3, we have module 2 as a dependency. So what we'll do is we will create dependencies and dependency. Inside that, you will be putting the GAV of module 2. So like this, if you have many dependencies, then you just create one more dependency tag and you put the GAV of that particular jar file or plugin. So like that, within the dependency tag, for each dependency internally sub tag, you will be putting the GAV of that specific project or jar file. So now let's go. So what I'll do is now I will copy this GAV and I'll go to this module 3. Okay, and now see here, we already have a default dependency. That is, they are saying that there is a jar or this is nothing but a plugin if you are using any JUnits. Okay, now JUnit is a plugin which is used for running unit test. Suppose if you want to run the unit test specifically using JUnit plugin, then by default it is saying that you need to use this, and that is what is the dependency. So in the same way, now we are trying to add a dependency of what? It is not a plugin, but it is a jar file of a different project. So simply we'll first add a dependency, okay, and we give the GAV of that particular. Okay, so now I have added the dependency of module 2 in module 3. Okay, so now which means every time when I compile module 3, it will check the presence of this, or it will use this module 2 dot jar and try to work on module 3. Okay, but what will happen here? So let me now try to do it manually. So I'll go to module 3. Okay, and then I'll say Maven package. Okay, so it is giving me an error. So do you understand anything by this error? It is saying that it could not resolve the dependency. For what? For this module 3 jar. Why? Because it is saying that it could not find the artifact. Artifact is nothing but a deliverable from a build. That is what I told you in the first class, right? We use different names. So it is saying that this artifact or jar is not present. And what is that? It is module 2 -1.0 snapshot.jar. So do we have this jar file? Where do you have this jar file?
In module 2.
Yes, do we have? But it is saying it is not present. Why is that?
So we didn't compile the module 2
No,
yet.
we have it. We have the jar here. It is the same answer what you gave me. So where does it module 3 look for all the dependent jars?
Oh, in local repository?
Exactly. So we didn't do the step called install in this, right? Did
Yeah.
we do that? No. Since we didn't do the install, it is still present here. So now first thing what you need to do is you have to go to module 2. Now run Maven install. And if you run, what it will do, it will take the file from this and put into the local repository. See, it is copying the module.2 jar and it is copying to the local repository. Okay, so now if you go back to module 3 and if you run Maven package, it will automatically pick up from this local repository and it will consider the compilation and go. You're getting it? So this is how you generally define a dependencies of either you can specify a plugin or you can specify a jar. It's simply put it inside the tag called dependency and give the GAV. Are you getting it?
Okay. Yeah. To install the jar file into local repository, can't we do it from the main directory? Like you created a POM there, right? In the main directory, module 1, module 2, module 3, and POM.
Yeah, you can do it. I
So
shouldn't come to that level. First, I'm showing you a,
okay,
module level. We'll go to that
okay,
next. Okay, but at least are you clear now? How do you put a dependency?
yes.
So now every time module 3 wants to run, module 2 has to be compiled, right? Okay. Now going back to the first thing what we did. Now, if you remember, what is this? This is through, I called this directly, right? The same question what you said. Now, sorry. So instead of compiling it, it is the same thing. So now if I come outside, okay, and now if I say Maven install, what is it going to do? It is going to do the same thing inside each of them. It will go inside module 1, it will compile, create the package. After that, it will copy this to the local repository. Then it will once again come here, copy it and put it inside the local repository. So like that, it will do the same thing for all the 3 modules. It is not like only for this you do like that, because as a project we are doing it. I mean, as a product we are doing, not as a individual component. Okay, so that is what we can do. But it answers your question, but my question now is, if you see the structure what we have given or the order what we have given is 3 1 2, right? That means first compile 2, then compile 1, then compile 2. But now in this case if you are working, it will not work. Why? Because module 3 is dependent on module 2. So module 2 should be compiled first and then come to module 3 and then module 1, right? Logically, before compiling module 3, module 2 should be compiled. Now, in that case, this logic will not work. Then it will be a problem. So right now the install is available. Now take this example. I have done changes in all the three. Now when you run module 3 now, it will be picking up which file? It will be picking up the module2.jar, which is present in the local repository, but that is not the latest one. Why? Because I have compiled some files here, which means I have modified some files here. So I need to compile it again and recreate the jar. Then I have to do an install. So based on that new file, module 3 should work. So for that, module 2 should first work and not module 3. So in that case, this order is not the right one. Yes or no? Don't you think it will not work in the same way as we expected when we have dependencies? Isn't it? It's not the right order, right? Did you guys get my question?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
in those case, what is that we can do? So again, to go back, so what we can do is, if you see, we just told only from the parent that all these things are child, which means if I put it inside modules, it means that this is a parent and all these are child. Whereas the child doesn't know anything about parent. So blindly what it is doing, this will just go inside this folder and just calling whatever command you gave. But for now, what we need to know is it should automatically do the dependency management. And how will that happen? It will happen only when you have a complete parent and child relation, wherein for now only the parent knows about child, whereas the child doesn't know anything. That is because as soon as this parent pom.xml enters this folder, it will just drop the command and it will leave all the execution to this. Okay, so in that way it doesn't know anything about the order, so it is just doing whatever you have told. So for that reason we have to establish a complete parent and child relationship. So how will you do that is, anyway we have told to the parent that these are the child. Now we have to do something to the child so that it will understand that this is my parent. So in order to do that, so we have an attribute called parent, wherein you simply specify the GAV of your parent, so that when you specify it like this, the child will give the complete handle to the parent, so that the parent is not just going to drop the command and say that you just run. It will take over all the commands what it has to run, but before that it will go through the complete project file, that is the pom.xml of the child, and based on the dependencies what it has to take care, it will work. Okay, to put it simple, let's try to do the same. So I will create a parent. I will close the parent tag. Now it has to give the GAV. So the GAV is here. I'll simply use that. Okay. So now what happens is this parent has a complete control over this pom.xml, and I will do the same thing here, and I'll do the same thing here. So now the parent.xml or the parent pom.xml has the complete understanding and the relationship. So now see how it behaves. Okay, see, so now if I just simply say Maven install, you see what happened there? What is it doing? So what is the first component that it is building?
Model 2.
Yeah, so
Mod 2.
it completely understands and takes care of all the dependencies, whatever you have to do. So first, it will see whether is there a dependency. If it is there, based on that, it will work. So now, if someone asks as an interview or a question here is, how does Maven does this? One thing is, you put up a parent-child relationship, that is using the modules here and a tag called parent. But internally, how it does this, we call it as Maven reactor. Okay, so there is something called as Maven reactor, and if you notice, that is the first thing which will be running. So Maven has something called as a reactor, which will first go through each and every project. It will decide what are the sources and resources that we need to do, right? The first step of our life cycle, that is Maven's life cycle. Then it will create a build order, and it will decide that this is what I have to do first, this is what I have to do next. So once it decides the build order in the reactor, then based on that, Maven will go ahead and run whatever steps you have specified with each of the component. Okay, so it is through the reactor, it does everything internally. So Vinay, did it answer your previous question, and did it answer my question? Kumar?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, but here there is no reactor in the sense it's logically treats, right?
Yes, internally, see how it does, even we literally don't know. That is only if you go through the code. But I'm saying how it does this. So reactor is the one which decides what is the build order. And how it decides, it internally takes care of the relationship between the parent and child, what you have given. So who does the build order is reactor does the build order.
So this POM is related to mod 2, right?
Yes.
Okay. So here we are deciding the parent, but
We are not
okay.
deciding, we are just giving the complete control to the parent. Now, what?
Okay, module 2 as the parent.
Yes. So now when this first POM, now when you execute this, it will not blindly go inside each folder and run. It will go inside and it will try to read the POM. When it is reading, it sees the information saying that parent, then it will take a control of this POM and decide that, wait, I am not supposed to trigger you first, because if I read your pom.xml, I see that you are saying there is a dependency of this. Then it will go inside this and it will read this. And after reading this, okay, then there is nothing dependency or whatever I have to do. First I'll do it here, then I'll come and then go with the order. So that is what it does. The first thing it does is it goes through each and every modules, and based on what you have given internally, it will decide how the project should be built. That is, what is the build order, and based on that, it will be working on it.
Okay. So first it will went for mod 2, and then how it is coming from mod 1? Is there an again parent who decided?
Yeah, see, logically it should go one after the other, but since
Yeah.
you have specified a dependency where mod 3 is dependent on mod 2, so now before executing mod 3, which one should it execute? Module 2, right?
Yeah.
After module 2, it will execute module 3. Then what is it remaining? Remaining is mod 1. Why? Because you have already executed mod 2 first. So it will be executing mod 2, mod 3 and mod 1.
So you're saying that it is also following the pattern there in the same way it's checking dependencies before that.
Yes, that's exactly right. Because it is not just running it blindly, and at the same time, it is not going and executing it internally. It takes into consideration each and every pom.xml, and it first decides what is the build order. Now that is the work of reactor, which will decide what is the build order, because module 1 is a independent module, right? Because it is not dependent on anything. So it can run whenever you want. Suppose if you have specified any dependency here, again based on that it will work. So all you have to do is you specify your dependency based on one component, and don't worry about what is the order, and Maven will take care of building your entire project based on dependency.
But here we remove the dependency tags, right?
Where? We have it still here.
So,
Sorry, module 3. Here we have this.
okay, got it.
It was mod 3 is dependent on mod 2.
Okay.
Getting it? Or if you want, I can do one more thing. Let me put, I'll do one thing. Now, see what is that I'm doing. What do you mean by this?
3 is dependent on mod 1.
Yeah, so what will be the order now?
Mod 1, mod 3, okay, mod 1 first, then mod, can you show me that POM file?
Yeah, so now mod 3 is dependent on mod 2. Okay, wherein mod 2 is dependent on mod 1. So it will be building 1, 2, 3 in that order. See, mod 3 is dependent on mod 2. Okay, so it will be like this. So which means 3 is dependent on 2. So first 2 should build and then 3 should build. Sorry. First 2 should build and then 3 should build. Okay, now this is confirmed. But now if you go to 2, 2 is dependent on 1 once again. Then before even compiling 2, 1 should be compiled. So it will start from this. And is there anything else left here? Nothing, only 3 modules. So it will start with 1, 2, 3. That is how it will do. So the order will be decided based on the dependencies what you give. You getting it? Hello,
Yes.
Kumar?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey Hemant, I'm sorry, just came a little late. Is it you're getting anything? Hello, Hemant? Okay, fine. I mean, maybe you can go through the video so that you will understand the first 10 minutes, or if you still have any doubts, let me know. I'll explain it once again. Okay, so that's pretty much I put it as simple as possible in explaining Maven, because I can make it a little more complex, but just to put it very simple, that's why I removed all those plugins, whatever we used, because if you run it, it might be taking little time, but here it just happened everything in 1 or 2 seconds, but it is easy for understanding in the initial case, but in the practical it will not be running it so simply, because you will be having multiple files, multiple dependencies, so it will take some considerable time. But at least for the demo, I'm just trying to put it as simple as possible with only that concepts, because we already learned plugins. So again, if you put it inside this, it might be confusing. That's why it looks like it ran very fast, but it will not be so fast. Okay. So is that concepts clear with how do I use dependencies and how do you work as a parent-child as a complete project.
Yes.
Okay, so now if you proceed further, there are a couple of things how you'll be running Maven specifically. Okay, so now that's what we need to learn. So one thing what you'll be doing is so far we saw only until install. So now as part of the lifecycle phase, we also have one thing called as deployment phase, right? So that is when you want to deploy something. So again, so when you say deployment, it is not so critical thing or it is not so tough thing what you need to do in Maven. So now the first thing you need to do is you need to know what is the application server which you are using or which you will use to deploy your artifacts. Okay, now when the question comes, you need to find out whether it is a particular application of your interest or whatever is in they are using in the company. So corresponding to that, there will be a plugin available for each and every application server. Right. So now for a demo, I just installed JBoss application server and we just use all those things. So now our requirement is say that we have one project and now in that project, what we want to do is I want to deploy whatever that I'm building it here. Okay. So when I'm building it here, I need to deploy this particular jar to some application server. So in that case, now let's go back to the initial class where how will I use this? I need to use a plugin, right? I need to use a plugin which is corresponding to a application server. So in that case, what and all do I need to say? The specific thing which I need to say is, like you remember, now I am not interested in doing everything that is right from the beginning. So I will go with the same concept of having the build tag, having the plugins and the plugin. After that, what should I give? I should give the GAV of that particular plugin what I'm going to use, right? So now this is the GAV for using JBoss application server. Okay, so now you give the specific details about that. And once that is done, I'm not going to give any phase or I'm not going to give any goals. Why? Because I'm not interested to attach anything related to it. So I will execute it only when I want. Because if I attach it to a phase, every time you will be deploying it unnecessarily. So we don't want to happen or we don't want that to happen. So what we'll do is we'll keep it as independent so that how do you invoke? We invoke using the short name of the plugin or we will use the standard name which the plugin gives. Using that we will use. So how do you know this? What we have to do is if you don't know, so just go and say that plugin. Okay, so here if you see it will give you a usage. So you can use all the usage and structures will also be there present specifically, and based on that how you want to have you can get it. So here if you see it is going to be the same where we are not interested to attach it to any particular phase. Let us try doing it separately so that when you're practicing you don't want to mix compiling and do the deployment. Now when you're trying to run, the only difference will be the configuration. That's what I said. So for the configuration, what and all details you need, specifically you need little details about where is the application server and how do you connect it, what is the username, what is the password, all those things has to be specified. So if you go in the production, there will be one system administrator who's maintaining this application server. So now when you are trying to run on a specific application server, all you need is that details. That is, where is the application server? How do you connect to it? What is the username and password? Where exactly you have to deploy? Okay, so those informations are what you need to specify. But other than that, you go with the default structure and it will be the same to everything. Okay, so now in that you have default goals which is used for each and every task. For example, I can use the same configuration, same plugin to deploy a jar. Okay, and I can use the same plugin to undeploy a jar. If I want, I can start this server and stop this service. All those things I can do. So for that, you don't have any specific options. How is it possible? It is because if you see, Maven gives different goals. So when you call this particular plugin name colon goal, then automatically it knows that, okay, deploy is the goal. For this goal, what I have to do? I have to do some deployment. Okay, so you have some standard examples for each and everything. So for now, you don't have to worry about going in deep. So if I say deploy, it automatically understands that I have to do a deploy. If I say undeploy, it knows that I have to do undeploy. That is why I am not going to write any specific goals, so that we will use the default goal which is given by the Maven for this particular plugin. So you can get all the list of plugins, whatever that you want to work specifically on a plugin here. Okay, so now for this specific application server, if you see what and all is required for the configuration, first I need to tell where is that installation that I have done, which means JBoss home is nothing but the place where I have installed this application server. Okay, then second thing is you need to say what exactly you are trying to put into this deployment. So now let's take this. I'll go here. I'll create this and okay. Now I will change this GAV to this particular one. Okay. I'll simply take this and I'll put, and I don't even have to give the name. I'll just say, so here I'm saying I have to use this plugin and you have to deploy it at this particular place. Okay, so now let me quickly start. So what I'll do is, okay, I'm just trying to start my application server, which is present in this place. Mm-mm. Okay, let me try going to this. Okay, so I have some deployments which I've already done. Okay, so I'm just running it. So quickly, what we'll do now is, so I have added this deployment plugin, that is to use the JBoss application plugin, wherein specifically access this installation of JBoss. Okay, now if we go to the command prompt, okay, let me go to mod 1 because this is what I have specified here. Okay, so now here, if I have to run, I need to run this specifically, this command. So only then it will be invoking this particular plugin. Okay, so now if you see, it is in automatically invoking a deployment step, wherein when do you deploy? You will deploy after the install phase, right? Where for deployment, logically you have to create the package. So before the package, you have to compile. Before the compile, you have to generate the resource. So that is why it is going through all the steps from the beginning, and once it is done, it has deployed. So now how do you see whether it has deployed or not? Logically, you go here and you see here it has deployed to this particular place. Okay, so like this, using this particular plugin, you can deploy or undeploy. Now, using the same plugin what we have used here, okay, using the same configuration details what I've given, all I'm going to say is undeploy. Now, as soon as I call this goal, automatically it knows that what it has to remove, it is the GAV what we have specified, right? So it knows that undeploy means what you have to undeploy. This particular GAV whatever you have specified has to be undeployed from this place. You see, it has removed. So this is what you will be doing in production, wherein they will be specifying you a particular application server, and in that application server, all you need is you have to get the details corresponding to what is the configuration that is needed. Logically, you might be using different, if you're using Tomcat, you might not be using JBoss Home. It might be something else, or if you're using WebSphere, that might be different. If you're using Glassfish, only the values of the configuration with respect to that particular plugin will be changing, wherein internally if you see, for accessing application server, what and all do you need? You need for certain details like where is it installed, what is the username, password, what exactly you want to access, all those details. Did you get that?
Yes. Well, I got it out.
Yeah,
Might be a little bit high, but if I need to deploy only a specific jar, then where can I specify that?
this is what we did, only this jar. Right now we
Okay, if okay, for instance, like if I'm giving this plugin and the demo project form file,
Mhm,
so I just want to deploy the mod one.
mhm.
So can I do it from there itself?
Which one?
Like the demo, the main project, the main POM is there, right? The
Mhm.
parent POM.
Yeah, so logically you will not be doing jar by jar. Okay,
Okay.
if you see what we
Okay.
did is jar. Okay, let me tell you the difference. So what do you guys
Yeah, I don't have
understand?
any idea regarding the deployment.
No, no, the job. Let me tell you what is the difference. So what is the difference between jar and var? That is what you need to know. And what is EAR? Kumar, do you know any difference? Or what do you think? What is jar? What is var?
Specifically, jar is nothing but it's a Java or whatever it is in the local that will work. When we are deploying that into the web application server like Tomcat and some other web servers, we will go for var, I guess.
Mm, yes, but what exactly is the difference?
Web applications means you have web HTML pages and all, and Java is all about Java pages.
No. So, okay. First of all, a deliverable in Java should be some archive. Okay, archive means all the class files whatever you have written or whatever you have got basically will be working, because all those things whatever you are seeing now, right, it has been executed through some class files. So you cannot directly run a class file because there might be dependencies of one class with other class file. So what we do is we link everything together, or we archive it together, called as a Java archive file. Okay, and that is what a very simple file is called as jar. So jar is nothing but a group of class files which is used to perform one single action, so that if one class file is dependent on other class file, all the class files are present at the same file. So if you want to perform action, you just group certain class files and put into a archive called as what? Jar file. That is what build is all about, right? If you see, the build is all about compiling and linking or assembly. That is what you're doing as a simple jar file. But now it is not always that you will be doing one functionality separately. Like here, for connecting to JBoss, I needed one jar. For doing my compilation, I need one jar. Okay, so in that case, you will be having separate jar. But when you're giving as an application, how will you give? Will you give like 10 separate jars and every time when someone has to invoke, he has to invoke one separate jar? No. There should be again one point of contact which might internally invoke different jars, right? That is how it should be. So in that case, how will you do is, so the same thing is whenever you are trying to work as a application, that is what kind of application? It is a web application. Then instead of putting everything into jar, you will combine multiple jars internally, and additionally you will put some XML files that will tell exactly what and all your web application requires. Okay, and that kind of archive is called as var. Even a var will contain class files, or it will contain a combination of jars. In addition, it will contain certain files specific to your application, so that your var doesn't just represent one functionality, but it represents a complete application. That is what we call it as var. Okay, now when the same thing, when you take it as an enterprise one, wherein you have to do some kind of licensing, then you do some more additional files and you create something called as EAR. So now if the question goes back to what you asked, do you want to deploy jar by jar? No, you will be creating a var, and based on that var, finally you will be deploying that. So that is why we create only on a particular component or a final component, which will create the exact var or jar, whatever you want to create, and then you specify the deploy only to that. Are you understanding the difference between jar and var now?
Yes.
Kumar?
Yes.
Hemant? I'm not seeing any answer from Hemant. Okay. So, all right. So this pretty much we are done. The few things which I need to know, but it's not so mandatory. So now we were working on SEM related activities, right? Suppose now whatever this directory that you have obtained, now assume that it is obtained from the central repository like Git. Okay, now what will you do for that? Now you have worked. Now what if there is a new file which someone else has modified and you want to take that file and update? Then what will you do? Logically, this would have been a your Git local repository, wherein you created this repository from a central repository. Now if you want to update some file inside this, what will you do? It goes back to the Git question. Did you understand my question?
No.
So practically in the production or when you're working in a company, how will you get this? Okay, now who will be writing all these files? Who will be writing the structure? The developer will be doing it, right?
Yeah.
Now where will be the repository be stored? It will be stored in
Locally.
central repository.
Central repository. Yeah.
Okay, now when you want to work, what will you do? You have to create a clone or you have to create a copy of the central repository and work in your local repository, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now my question, what I'm saying is, say that you are working on some files, you have did some compilation and built is fine. Now a developer does a new check-in. Okay, so assume that a developer has modified one of the component, or he has modified a Java file inside a module. Now, how will you update your workspace with the file that he has put in the central repository?
Git pull.
Exactly, man. That is the answer. So you will do a git pull. Only then your current workspace will be up to date with the central repository. If you put it in a common term, you should say that you have to do some kind of update in the repository with your local workspace so that whatever is the latest change, you will get and work, right? Now, one of the way what you can do is you can manually run the command called git update here. Sorry, git pull here, right? So instead of doing it in Maven, there are certain plugins through which you can connect directly to the Git repository or whatever repository that you're working. Suppose if a developer doesn't know all this kind of commands, what you can do is you can simply write using a plugin which is available for SCM, and using that plugin, if you specify the particular goal name, it will take the corresponding action. So that if you might use Git, you might use Subversion, or you might use Perforce. So wherein a developer doesn't have to know the exact command for each and everything. So what you can simply do is you can write a plugin like this and you can give it to him, so that if you just tell him whenever you want to update a file, you do this. So internally, if you see, if it is Git, it will be doing Git pull. If it is SVN, that will might do a Git checkout internally, or whatever command is relative to that particular tool. So this is one way what you can give it to the user and ask them to work. But it is not the right way to use, or I will say it is not the right, it is not the best way to do, because that is why we need Jenkins especially. So if you remember, in the continuous integration, we had the same scenario. That is, now, whenever a developer checks in a code, what is that I wanted to do? We wanted to update the workspace and do the build based on the latest change.
Continue.
Wherein, what did Jenkins do? It itself created one repository, and automatically when a new check-in has happened, it was doing an update, right? So in literally, we did the same thing there also. We used the Maven project, but we didn't write anything like this. We just said Maven package, wherein Jenkins automatically took care about updating the repository. Now that is what you will be practically doing in the production when you're using Jenkins. If you're not using Jenkins, then you have to go with doing all those things here. Instead of that, what you can simply do is use Jenkins. That will take care of whatever activity, especially from adding up the activity that it can do. But just for interview point of question, someone asks, you just need to know, yeah, just like any other plugin, we also have a tag called SCM specifically, which internally is going to invoke a plugin. Now, this tag is a common tag. Okay, so no matter what tool you use Git, you use Perforce, you use Subversion, the same details will be there. That is, you need to give the URL where you can access, and you need to give the connection string that will tell what is the username password if you want to give, and finally you will be saying how you have to connect or where exactly the repository is. So those are the details what you need to specify for each one of them. Okay, so it is not like it is depreciated. The only thing is the usage in the practical is not so big. No one actually uses, but just because you have to know, I'm just telling you. But once this is done, I'll once again go through that continuous integration, what I was telling to you, so that you can get a complete idea about that. Okay.